podcast. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Alexa.
Hey girl, hey.
What's up?
We've got a good one today.
I'm so excited. So today we're talking about the incomparable Britney Spears, pop culture icon, and somebody who was arguably one of America's sweethearts until America ripped her to shreds, of course, and the California Conservatorship she's been under for the past 13 years. We're going to break down what it is, why she's under one, and how the future's looking for her.
This is going to be a lot.
Are you ready?
I mean, she's been around since we were legitimately children, so I feel like we've got a lot of background to cover real quick and dive into some real heavy legal topics. So this might be more difficult than GameStop, realistically.
It might. There's just so much, and I feel like we have so much knowledge just organically by just being alive during that era.
Right. Truly.
So we can talk about so much of her. We can spend 10 hours just talking about background and how much we loved all her music. But for the sake of this episode, let's just hit some highlights and show the stuff that we think will really show how much her life changed and how quickly it did and how it all really factors into her conservatorship.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, okay, so Britney was born in 1981 in Mississippi.
Okay.
I know she grew up singing in her Southern Baptist church that her family had gone to for some time. And so her parents, her dad's name was Jamie Spears and her mom's name is Lynn Spears. I guess they must have recognized her talent quite early on. And so they decided to start taking her to like voice and dance lessons to try and kind of build, you know, the platform that she would eventually kind of rest her crown upon. And so Britney and her mom in her younger days before high school ended up moving to New York so that she could work on building those skills and trying to like find some roles in the entertainment scene.
Kind of reminds me of what you wished you would have had.
That's so fucked up. I just feel like, why do you have to bring that up?
Sorry, I'm just thinking about you. So, sorry, but she ended up getting into the Mickey Mouse Club at 92.
Rude.
Look, you were too young anyway.
Why? She was like 9 doing it.
No, in 1992, you were way too young. There's no way you could have done it. I'm trying to make you feel better.
Fine, just go.
Okay. So she gets into the Mickey Mouse Club in 92. She's just 11 years old. She was previously rejected, but something worked for her. So she's in there with Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake, Ryan Gosling, Kerry Russell.
It's a pretty good cast.
All the greats, right? All the greats.
I mean, some decent ones for that point in time.
Kerry Russell, one of the greats. It's canceled in 96, though. So she returns home and, you know, knows that there's more to life and keeps on working.
So that's what you guys share. Remember you when you were like staring out into the rolling hills of Chino, knowing that there was more to life?
Yeah, but I'm like at the bees, like hoping there's more, and she's just like on a TV show and
No, you were at Robin eating endless fries.
All right, make it more exciting for me, thank you. So between 98 and 2002, she just starts hitting success. She goes from performing in shopping malls to touring with NSYNC, one of my favorite boy band.
I'm a Backstreet Boys girl, but we can discuss that another time.
Of course you are. Team NSYNC all the way.
Team Nick
But
Carter.
it's all about JC.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you didn't say JT because we've got some things to talk about with him today.
Yeah, and it's not even about today. Just I've always been Team JC.
Oh, okay.
But
all right.
Neither here nor there. So she's performing with them, and then she comes out with her own hits. Baby One More Time. Iconic.
Classic.
Right? Oops, I Did It Again.
Also classic.
Her Britney album. She's performing at the Super Bowl. She's getting all these sponsorships. My personal favorite, she stars in the one-of-a-kind hit movie, Crossroads.
That was your jam?
Did you ever see it?
Yeah, it was terrible. I don't understand what do you mean one of your favorites?
It was terrible, but in high school, I was a journalist for our little school newspaper, and it was the first movie I ever reviewed. I have a very special affection for this movie.
Okay. Well, so in high school, I skipped school to go watch 8 Mile Road. So we were definitely on like different wavelengths with like the content we were looking at.
I grew up in Chino Hills. Red Robin was the thing. Like this was the edgy movie, I have
Crossroads.
to say. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I was allowed to see it. And then she even has time to date Justin Timberlake.
I mean, honestly, I will say that when I was going through her background, because I don't think I fully appreciated everything that she had done. Like, I obviously knew that there were the hits and there were the classics. And, you know, Britney Spears is not new, but I didn't realize just how much she had done. And so I feel like, kind of when I look at Beyonce's accomplishments, I feel lazy. Because I'm like, you were like 21 doing all this. How is this even possible?
Yeah. No, I agree too. It's funny when you're younger, right? 'Cause she's older than us. I thought she was so adult.
Right.
And she's
right.
in the, you know, especially in her music videos.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, cool. Wow, she's so old and cool. And
Yeah.
then looking back, I'm like, oh my God,
She was a baby.
you were 19.
She was truly a child. That was when I was like walking to McDonald's in the middle of the night because I needed a fry and a milkshake.
Right.
And she was traveling the globe making hits.
I'm not going to get into what I was doing at 19, but it certainly wasn't this.
It's fine. But it's also crazy because when you think about how much success she had in that period, we can now look back and realize that like this is kind of around the time that paparazzi and tabloids really became like a mainstay in American culture. Yeah. I mean, eventually kind of global culture, but I still think it's mostly here. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, they were already criticizing her for being hypersexualized. And I remember like one governor's wife said that she would shoot Britney if she like ever ran across her because she thought that she was a bad example for young girls.
So ridiculous.
Can you imagine feeling that strongly about a 21-year-old singer?
Yeah. And I remember too, my mom would always love that. Okay, might be bad to admit, but if I had to choose was Team Christina over Team Britney, but I loved Britney. And my mom, I remember saying like, oh, I'm so glad because, you know, Britney, like the bad Catholic school girl, right? That music video. She was just like, oh my God, what is this? Little did she know that I didn't want to emulate her, but
you just want to date her. That's
yeah,
fine.
that seems to be a recurring theme in these episodes.
Christina was great.
But they were all coming under fire. But I feel like Britney the worst because she was just the most popular. Mm-hmm. She was so famous, more than Christina. I liked a little underdog. She wasn't even an underdog, but compared. So anyway, the media is simultaneously hyping her up and tearing her down. And especially in America, I feel like more than lifting people up, we actually enjoyed tearing people down even more. And poor thing, I feel like things start to change for her, even though she's still accumulating success after success.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we definitely, don't want to bore anybody with dates, but I think we need to kind of mention the years so that people understand just how rapidly things started to kind of spiral down. Mm-hmm. Because like we said, she had this really strong streak where she was doing like Super Bowl and touring the world, and she had back-to-back albums. But then, around 2002, so she breaks up with Justin. They had only been together for 3 years. But he released a Cry Me a River song and a video that same month with her lookalike. So it kind of fuels rumors that she cheated on him in the end.
Yeah, I remember that. And I was like, oh my God. I took it at face value. I was like, oh, she did.
I definitely remembered watching it, but I don't think I looked that far into it. I was like, oh, this is kind of fucked up. And like, I don't really know what he's doing, but it wasn't clear to me until like now, kind of reflecting back on it, that it was literally a dead lookalike from behind and was very kind of illusory and kind of making an homage to the relationship that they had.
Yeah, I don't know if I thought it immediately when I watched the video, but because I kept seeing it all over in TV and magazines, I was like, oh, that's what it meant. And I'm young and I don't know the difference. And now when we're researching this, I look back and I'm like, oh my God, now that I'm a much more independent, strong woman, looking back and seeing that Diane Sawyer after that is asking her basically, not even asking, actually accusing her, saying, oh, you broke his heart. What'd you do? It's like, come on. She's like a young girl, and Diane Sawyer, I mean, whatever, journalism, right? And then...
But she was no different from paparazzi in that way. Like, I think for her, it all came down to views. Like, she's not selling pictures, sure, but she's definitely just trying to get views and have people come to... I mean, let's be honest, like the news networks are never really doing that amazingly unless they have one of these massive moments. And so while I think it was extremely inappropriate that Diane Sawyer would ask a question like that, we also know that she was doing it to like bring people to whatever the news special was.
Completely. And that's, it's really heartbreaking, even more so because you can see the double standard between how they treat women and how they treat men. And the way that she's basically slut-shamed for it, even though she never said, yeah, that's what happened. Justin never said that.
Right.
We'll get into other things Justin's trying to say now, but no one was defending her. Everybody it was fun. Now,
I mean, on top of the fact that back then, like, people were criticizing her for her dancing in her clothes, but you think about the boy bands who were, like, shirtless in shorts grinding girls on the stage. Mm-hmm. Or it's always funny when a guy like kind of cheats on his girlfriend because it's like, oh, guys are just being guys. So to your point, that double standard was very rampant back then. And it's just, you see when you think about where we are now, which we'll obviously get to, it all kind of plays in.
Yeah, and Justin didn't help it. He chose that stand-in for a reason in that video. So anyway, she's still putting out music and doing her thing. She's performing at the VMAs in 2003 with Madonna and Christina. You know, that famous
kiss.
Famous kiss.
Famous kiss.
Again, I don't want to keep talking about my sexuality, but I have to say this is an important point in my life because I saw it and I was like, holy shit.
Wait,
oh
what was
God.
wasn't there the one year, this is so random, where like there was like a Russian girl group and they were like all making out on stage and like MTV
Tattoo?
I think so. And I almost feel like MTV like cut it in the middle because they were worried about what people would say.
Yeah, I think it's Tattoo, like 2 women.
I don't, it was so long ago.
Yeah, you'd get glimpses, especially MTV would be good at giving you just a little bit. I'm like, no more.
Just enough to make you question your
Why
sexuality.
Yeah, just like a little peck, and then it cuts to black.
Yeah.
Jesus comes on the TV.
Well, so she did not only have the controversy around the kiss, which I think was less controversial, but shortly thereafter, she gets married to a childhood friend in early 2004, and that literally has it annulled 55 hours later.
Ouch. Right, and then later that year, in late 2004, she marries Kevin Federline.
K-Fed.
K-Fed, one of her backup dancers, after dating for only a few months. I think it was very quick.
I guess when you're traveling the world together and you're like together all the time, maybe that kind of falsely makes you think that like you're meant to be together forever, because you're like skipping all of like the dating and the courting and you're just like, oh, life is great, we're touring the world, we're eating at the best restaurants, like we're in love, everything's gonna be amazing.
Yeah.
And I think there was maybe some hope for that at some point, but I mean, she said, I guess they ended up having this reality show on UPN, which like flashback to how old we are, UPN. I don't even think that exists anymore.
UPS, you mean?
No, UPN. So they have this reality show on UPN called Britney and Kevin Chaotic. Okay. And she was like, she now says it was the worst choice of her career. Yeah. And I can see why, because they were young and like cute, but they were also really like honestly a hot mess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not good. I mean, if you're going to name your newlyweds and you're going to name your show Chaotic, you're probably not setting yourselves up for success
here.
That's
a good point. I never thought about that.
Yeah, like that's a terrible... And plus, people were really judging him, right? He didn't have the best image.
Right.
He always kind of looked...
I mean, who's another bad boy?
Not very cleaned up.
He's also another bad boy. She's like another down south sweet girl, and he's a bad boy. And so this is like, you know... America's truest love story.
Judgments.
But, right. So they have this show. Mm-hmm. She's still, like, working in the background. She releases a couple singles, but they decide that she's going to slow down. And so, she has the 2 kids. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in, like, the span of these having 2 kids, paparazzi catch her driving in 2006 with one of the babies in her lap. Mm-hmm. And so she's saying it's because the paps were scaring her and wanted to get away. But, you know, obviously the media or the people who are on the other side are not seeing it that way.
Right. They had a field day. And I mean, look, do we recommend driving with your, couple-month-old child in your lap?
Probably not.
No. As legally, I mean, we don't want to be those lawyers, but we're probably going to say don't do that. At the same time, I don't know, we don't even understand what it's like to be followed that often. And everyone's so desperate to have your picture taken, because I think they're selling these pictures for thousands and thousands of dollars, and you're just trying to get away with your child. You don't have time probably to strap them into their car seat and do all that. I'm not saying every time she should do this, but also what's the other side of this?
But it's also a double standard, because I think you see dads who are like never around, and it's like, oh, they're just working and they're being a good dad, and she's like, from my knowledge, or from what I saw, it seemed like she tried to really bring the kids with her everywhere. And so, like, obviously in instances like this, maybe not the best choice, but, she was trying to be a good mom. And so I think it's just unfair that, while not safe, that really kind of painted her poorly. And I think ultimately to put a strain on her and her relationship, because at the end of that same year, she ends up filing for divorce from K-Fed for irreconcilable differences, which basically just means that there's no specific cause, like it's not like a cheating or violence or anything like that, but more just like they're not getting along, and so they can't really pinpoint what the reason is, but they want to get divorced either way. And so I think, at that point, there seemed to be some hope that like things would improve, because people thought that K-Fed was a big part of her kind of starting to lose control and seem a little, unhinged. Yeah,
but unfortunately, things don't necessarily turn around for her. I think later that year, or early 2007, her aunt that she's really close with passes away. She has to go and stay at a drug rehab facility for a day in Antigua. She comes back, and that's when she shaves her head.
That's when the buzz cut happens.
Yeah, those infamous pictures of her shaving her head, which we can get into. But Then she basically admits herself to another LA treatment center in the weeks following and never seems to really stay in there. And then that's when you have that incident too where she attacks a paparazzi car with an umbrella. Apparently it was after she was trying to see her kids but wasn't able to, so she was distraught and they kept asking her questions and that was her reaction. But again, here we have what we keep touching on, the double standard. There have been plenty of male celebrities who have attacked paparazzi. I mean, if you just Google it, actually, there's so many instances of it. The first person that came to mind for me, though, was Alec Baldwin, because I think he one time got so pissed off, he actually grabbed a paparazzi and slammed him onto the hood of his car and kept him down. How did I miss this? Yeah, it's really, literally Google celebrities attacking paparazzi. And there are articles about this.
I mean, can you imagine, though, like, even on a very personal, scale, and obviously we are nowhere near Alec Baldwin or Britney Spears status, but, like, when I go to the grocery store, I'm like, please don't talk to me. I'm just here to get my groceries. Don't look at me. I've got a baseball cap on. I'm really just trying to live my normal life. And so for her, I'm sure she's like, y'all, I'm just trying to go get some ice cream. Like, back up.
Yeah, leave me alone, which I feel is part of what happened with her shaving her head. I don't think she probably woke up that day and was like, you know what the best hairstyle for me is?
Right.
No hair.
Yeah.
Apparently she just said she was tired of people touching her hair, and I'm sure she had enough, and it was a control thing for her.
Right.
Because I think the hairstylist refused. So I don't know if she requested they shave her head or whatever. I mean, we don't know.
I think so. I think that, like, reports have come out since then where she basically asked them to, and they were like, we're definitely not doing this. You're Britney Spears.
There you go. So she grabs him. Yeah. And does it herself.
But I think to your point, like, besides the control around, people just touching her hair and touching her without really asking for her consent, I mean, when you think about it, she's been controlled her entire life. Like, she started performing so young. Even her initial record label, Jive Records, apparently they were the reason behind her, like, making her voice sound more like a baby or younger instead of, like, a deeper kind of, pitched, full voice that she had.
Yeah, and the media's not helping this too. It was crazy, but I saw this when we were researching, and it said that after she cut her hair, the salon owner started selling her hair to the highest bidder, essentially. And the hair clippers, and even I guess she left behind a half-drunk Red Bull. So they're just selling it to whoever. And then interviews started coming out where they interviewed the hair salon owner and even a psychiatrist who's never treated her to, like, analyze her, in quotes, right? So they're just, I mean, she has no chance, essentially.
There's no humanity. There's truly no humanity.
Even if she wasn't doing all these things, I'm sure they'd find a way to misconstrue something that she did, is the point.
Yeah. And I think looking back, a lot of people believe there was a mix of, postpartum depression because she had just had 2 kids. They were both pretty young at that point in time. And obviously there was this insane pressure and attention on her life, which really kind of came together to possibly lead to, like, a really, serious mental crisis for her.
Yeah, and unfortunately you see this with other celebrities.
Like Kanye. I mean, he has also lived his entire life in front of a camera. I mean, maybe not as long as Britney because he didn't start at that same age, but he's definitely been in the public eye for so long that we have also seen, like, his mental health concerns kind of come up, and it's been ridiculous how people have treated him and kind of criticized him when it's like, if you don't have a mental illness, I don't think you got the place or the space to comment on it.
Yeah, there's so much judgment around it too, like you said, from people who don't know, that even if, I know that his tweets came under fire, right? He says things, he does things at times, and people are so quick to criticize him for it without having more compassion and understanding for the things that are going on for him that are real things that he struggles with on the day-to-day that a lot of people have at least are able to experience in private. And celebrities don't get that.
I mean, it's like the same thing as Britney. Like, when she cut her hair, everybody thought it was funny, and they were joked about her, buzz cut. And then Kanye's done some things where you're like, bro, you're tripping right now. Like, what the hell is happening? And now you can, like, look back and be like, no, those were, like, the writings on the wall that something was going on.
Yeah, let's not laugh at them.
Right.
Let's say, like, are you okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you need help?
And I mean, obviously she did need help because things kind of continue to spiral out from there. She ultimately loses custody of her sons for unknown reasons. So I think it kind of shows that, like, they were probably whoever was on K-Fed's side was probably able to take in evidence to the court of all of these kind of instances where she had shaved her head and she drove with a kid in her lap and blah, 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 blah. And so it really piles on to kind of, leading to, like, more of a spiral really in her life. And at some point I know she it was like early 2008, and I think she had the kids for the weekend, and she refuses to give them back to Kevin. And so somehow they stepped in to intervene and got the kids back, but then she ends up getting hospitalized at Cedars-Sinai, which is a hospital here in California, the next day after the police came to her house and thought she was under the influence, which really meant that not only did K-Fed, he already had custody, but then they decided that he had sole physical and legal custody because things were just getting so bad so quickly.
Yeah, and then she's admitted to UCLA Medical Center psych ward for 5 days, and that's when she's placed under a temporary conservatorship that was led by her dad and attorney Andrew Wallet, which basically gave them complete control over everything. And it's important to note that while all this stuff is happening, she's still doing things with her career. She releases 2 albums, Blackout and Circus. She's top 10 across the world, guest starring on How I Met Your Mother. She's opening the VMAs. She even did a 60-minute documentary on her life for the record. And later, she is able to regain some visitation rights after working out an agreement with Kevin. So it wasn't like all bad, all good. She's still functioning. She's still doing things. It's just there's some unfortunate events in between.
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, like, I think it's impressive because she was still working. But to your point, she was put in this conservatorship, and she, ultimately had to remain in it for some time. But I think before we kind of dive into the specifics of her conservatorship arrangement, it's probably helpful for us to take a step back and talk about what it is and why we have it, etc.
Break it down for us, Nicole. What is it?
So in Cali, it's called a conservatorship, but it's also called a guardianship in other states. And so it's basically a court process that occurs if the state thinks that an adult is incapable of making their own decisions, or even if they're like vulnerable to outside influence or manipulation. So the court will then, they'll decide that one of those things exists for you, and they'll step in and they'll assign either an individual or an organization to kind of handle some of the affairs for you and take care of your life. And so typically, which makes the most sense, it's used for elderly people because obviously, you get a bit older, and so like maybe you're not in position to take care of yourself anymore. And sometimes for, disabled individuals who are legally adults but still need somebody who also legally can help take care of their affairs.
Right. And it's important to note that in California, we actually have 2 different types of conservatorships. Ones that cover personal matters. So you think things like handling your own medical situation, your living decisions, having the ability to provide care for yourself. And then you have the estate kind of finance. I would say like your finances are really the way that you should think about estate conservatorships. So if someone can't understand their bills, or someone, like you were saying, exercises undue influence over them and is taking advantage of their financial situation. You can see this a lot with like elderly people who are really rich, and you have some younger person kind of stepping in and trying to take advantage of that, right?
Right. But I guess, so they're in California. That's where she was. They've got the conservatorship. They've got the 2 types that Alexa mentioned. They've got the personal and the estate finances. But to even get the conservatorship put in place, somebody, and it could be somebody from your family, it could be somebody really close to you. Like in this instance, it could have been her manager, which I'm not saying that it was, but because her circle was wide, really anybody can file a petition with the court. And then the court will send investigators to observe the person's life and basically see if there's even a valid reason for there to be a conservator. Because obviously, not everybody's right. And I think this is a sensitive matter. So they really try to do their due diligence to figure out, like, okay, is there any basis for this petition? Or is this kind of like a false claim? And then they'll take into account even like testimony from witnesses who could be like family and friends who can obviously speak to whether they think you need kind of this arrangement to take place. But even more, in California, if you're requesting for mental concerns, you basically have to have a psychiatrist testify that you have what's called a DSM diagnosis. And so that the DSM is basically this medical book that's called Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is a mouthful.
Yeah, you did it.
Basically, they're saying that, like, we're not taking this lightly.
Right.
So you need to have somebody who's a professional come and say that if you're saying somebody needs a conservatorship for mental reasons, we know that there's medical evidence or like medical testimony saying that that's actually the case.
Exactly. And as you're kind of touching on, this is all a little controversial, right? You got to make sure that you're sure. ACLU, for example, not really into this, says the legal process is opaque, extreme, often unnecessary, and deprives people of their rights. And it's it can be easier to get, let me say this, it's easier to get into than it is to get out of.
Right.
It's kind of hard to get out of, because once you're in, I just feel like they feel like there's a reason why you're in it.
And I think it's interesting, right? Because somebody is stepping in to take care of either your personal matters and or your financial matters, there's really a high kind of risk for abuse here. Mm-hmm. And, yes, the court is supposed to do routine monitoring, but that doesn't always happen. Like, let's just be real. Courts are busy. Governments are overwhelmed. And so, sometimes I presume that they can't always kind of make sure that things are running the way that they're supposed to. And so there have been a lot of pushes kind of for reform around conservatorship law. And it's, further complicated by the fact that people under conservatorship can still work, and so they can still be active. And so it's like, which one is it? Do you need somebody to tell you what you can do personally, or can you work? Because sometimes those things don't like make sense against each other.
And I think that's what's kind of hard for Britney, because she was working and doing a lot during this time. So it makes people think, do you really need this or not? Because you're clearly capable of going on tour, you're putting out albums, you're on shows, but then you're telling me that you can't even have control over your person. I think that's the one that gets people a lot too.
Yeah.
And what makes it murkier as well, conservators receive a salary.
Wow.
And so sometimes people feel there might be a conflict of interest. Your conservator might think, well, I want to keep my salary, so let's keep this conservatorship going.
Let me make it seem like they need this.
And really what we're touching on is conservatorship should really be a last resort. Let's try all other alternatives first. So there are things like advanced healthcare directives, which allow you to appoint someone to make healthcare decisions for you. You can couple that with a power of attorney, which allows someone to make decisions for you again. And even a trust where, trust is a separate legal entity that holds your assets, and you can appoint someone to manage it for you. So I think some people feel like, hey, did any of this happen? Did you guys try this first? I know she has a trust that was enacted in 2004, but it's really for her kids. And I know that her sister actually is trustee and has been since 2018, but I think it's different.
But even more broadly speaking, I think, like you said, this is really supposed to be a last resort. And so it's interesting to see for it to be the last thing that people are supposed to use as an option. The process to terminate a conservatorship is it's super arcane, and it's not really clear, and it doesn't seem like people have a great chance of doing so. But basically you have to file a petition to have the conservatorship arrangement revisited. And again, just like the original petition, it can be filed by anybody involved in the conservatorship or somebody close to the situation. But then all over again, the court has to basically appoint an expert to examine the case and see what the person's condition is. And it just requires like all these hoops to jump through to basically unwind what's already happened.
Mm-hmm. The person basically has to prove they're good. And it's kind of hard because if you're already in this dynamic, how do you prove you're independent when you're already in a dependent relationship?
Right. And I guess, and like I said, there's like, apparently, from what I've researched, there's like a low success rate from getting out of conservatorships. And let's say this, because they're probably most often used on elderly people and people who are mentally disabled, like it makes sense that there's probably not a lot of a track record to show that you can terminate one. But then there needs to be a process because you've got situations like this. And so, now that we've talked about like what a conservatorship is, just like laying it out one more time. So in California, it's basically when the court sets up somebody, a person or an organization, to take care of either your personal affairs or your financial affairs, or both. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to get out of.
Yeah. And so bringing it back to Britney, basically they said both. They said, no, you need somebody to handle your personal and your financial. And rewinding to 2007, 2008, they're looking at all the things that we talked about, right? She's going in and out of mental health facilities. She doesn't return her sons at one point. There's these images of her attacking paparazzi, shaving her head, right? They're using a lot of what's in the media, what happened to her, to impose this. And it's crazy, but she went into this conservatorship at age 26. She's now 39.
Yeah.
She's still in it. Her dad has been a part of it this entire time, essentially. And it was initially supposed to be a temporary arrangement, except it's been extended 4 times. So do we still call it temporary? Not sure. And the important thing to note here, too, is that the exact details of this arrangement are largely private. The documents are sealed.
Right.
Sealed just means the the court says we're not going to make these documents public for one reason or another.
Which makes sense, because if they're saying that she's got, you know, any mental concerns, like, people have a right to their privacy when it comes to their mental and physical health. So it makes sense that, like, this would have been sealed by the courts.
Yeah, and I think at the time they didn't need the media to use anything else against her.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that essentially her dad and a lawyer were in charge of her finances and her personal choices. And they are keeping track of every expense, like Starbucks. They keep track of that.
I would be embarrassed if somebody was keeping track of my expenses like that, but...
Yeah, and her dad's overseeing her mental health treatment, approving her visitors. I mean, this is probably not your ideal situation when you finally move out of the house and you get away from your parents' reach. He's looking at everything, and he's getting an annual salary.
He's getting paid.
He's getting $130,000. Plus, he got 1.5% of the revenues from her Las Vegas residency.
Wasn't she getting like $500,000 a night or something really impressive?
She's gotten like, I think, tens of millions.
Wow.
Between like when she was doing it. Oh, yeah. Anyway.
And that's what's crazy though, is that, you know, we just generally ran through all of the control that she was under, but she was largely working that entire time. Like you said, she was doing the Vegas residency. She was a judge on X Factor. She released 3 more albums. So it's like, what level of control and personal management does she actually need if she can continue to be like this domineering woman in the music industry?
And she was working, like you said, and then things seemed to take a little bit of a turn for her in early 2019. That's when she announces that she's going to take an indefinite work hiatus and actually cancels her second Vegas residency. I think it coincides with when her father got really sick. He almost dies.
Yeah. And there are a few things that are funny about this story. Yeah. Very few. Very, very few. But I will say one moment or video that I appreciated was when she goes to cancel the Vegas residency. And there's like thousands of people outside waiting for her. This is Britney. So like, I get it. The energy was high. You're in Vegas. There's probably a few drugs around. Got it. Not that I participate.
Yeah.
But
we've heard of it.
People were outside and she basically does like one of those cool pop-ups out of the stage and walks out. People are screaming and she just walks down the aisle, gets into a car, and that's it. And people you like see the footage and people are like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah, people are like, where's the snake? Are you going to perform again? And then she's just like, bye.
Insane.
Poor thing.
But so she cancels the residency, like you said. Her dad's sick and almost dies. And so somehow he ends up becoming the sole conservator. So as a reminder, Alexa said, previously Jamie the dad and the attorney, but then it becomes just Jamie the dad. So he gets even more power, and he's allegedly like forcing her into psychiatric facility because she's violating some like rules that he has for how she can live her life.
Hard alleged, right? We don't know. Father says differently, but that's what's coming out. And then simultaneously, the dad, Jamie, is having issues with Kevin and their kids. He even gets a restraining order against Jamie because of some alleged child abuse against their kid. I don't know. It gets very messy. And that's when the court actually temporarily replaces Jamie as conservator over her person, again, her personal matters, with Jody Montgomery. She's a professionally licensed conservator and Britney's care manager. And keep in mind, though, Jamie's still in control of her finances at this point.
So shortly after this all happens in 2020, Britney's team ends up filing, a document or petition with the court, basically asking to make this, temporary woman, Jody, that you just mentioned, the permanent conservator of her personal stuff. And then separately, she wanted to have Jamie replaced as being the conservator for her finances by this company called Bessemer Trust Company. And so they're basically like a trained financial entity that kind of works and specializes in this area. But I think it's really important to note, and it was really interesting for me, that she didn't ask for the whole arrangement to end. Like in no form in that petition did she say like, I want to cancel the conservatorship. She just said, I don't want Jamie to be a part of it anymore. And actually specifically acknowledges that she probably still needs the conservatorship like arrangement generally.
Yeah, definitely important to acknowledge. So the judge ends up granting her request to bring in a co-conservator, that Bessemer Trust, but does not get rid of Jamie. So now they're sharing Jamie and Bessemer the financial matters over Britney.
And so I think it brings up really interesting questions. I mean, as we've talked about before, there's always, for us at least, we look at the legality of things and we look at the morality of things. And so I think this issue is truly kind of all over the place and touches like everything. So with respect to the morality, I mean, there's definitely like this conflict of interest that we've kind of, touched on so far. And so I think, like Alexa said, conservators make money. So she ends up paying for these people's basically livelihoods, and she's paying all of her dad's own legal expenses and ultimately for his life if he's making $130,000 and 1.5% of her residency revenues.
Yeah, and although most of the documents are sealed, so we can't really look at them, I know that in a couple that have come out, the lawyer for the conservatorship has actually referred to this whole arrangement as a hybrid business model, which just leaves a bad taste in your mouth to think, do you ever want to think of a conservatorship as a business model?
Somebody's life.
I get that you're handling someone's finances, but when you say business model, it sounds dirty. It sounds like exploitive. It sounds like you're trying to make money off of them.
Right.
And again, I kind of touched on this, but who wants their dad all up in your personal business?
Right.
And that's the thing, is there are two different conservatorships, the financial and the personal. But the personal, she can't drive without permission. There's allegedly, she doesn't have her own email. All kind of communication with her is monitored. And that's already tough enough. And then it's your dad. I mean, you're back to being a
It's so
child,
awkward.
But then again, like we keep saying, she's performing and she's doing all these things. So,
right.
But
I think that's the morality of it all. Like the right versus wrong is arguable because we don't know specifically what her situation is. But I think, for speaking from the legal standpoint, there could have been reasons to actually support this arrangement in the past. Like, I mean, obviously the court, I would like to think, did their due diligence. They had expert testimony. They had investigators go in, and I understand that her finances were pretty bad before this happened. And so apparently she wasn't massively in debt, but there were a bunch of lawsuits against her for like breaching contracts. But now, 13 years later in this conservatorship, allegedly her estate is worth about $58 million. So I mean, there's definitely a strong argument that having somebody else in control of her finances has improved her financial health and like the estate that's ultimately going to be passed down to her kids.
Yeah, and I even read that again, allegedly, you're going to hear that a lot in this episode, but that allegedly even the Vegas residency, a requirement of that contract was that she be in the conservatorship to make sure that she didn't bail.
Wow.
Because like you said, she had breach of contract because she wasn't showing up to some stuff before.
Right.
So I think the conservatorship actually lends some kind of confidence and reassurance for third-party businesses to think, okay, Britney's going to show up.
And not even just to third parties. I mean, like K-Fed seemed to be in support of it too. I guess he said, or his attorney said that it creates a stable environment for the boys because they know like what the times are going to be, what the rules are going to be, and there's definitely like some parameters around what their lives look like, which is important. They're kids, they deserve stability. So I think that's such another drop in the bucket for like maybe at some point it was legal, but the question is now.
Yeah, and I even read that it could be that Britney isn't objecting to the conservatorship because that actually might help her in the whole custody arrangement with Kevin. Again, making sure that she is stable, that she's okay, and that way, all right, boys, go with your mom. It's going to be okay. So there's possibly some pros to this as well.
Right, but I think there's so much unknown, like including her mental health. Like obviously that factored in. We do know that, but we don't know to what extent, and nor do we need to. I mean, frankly, like we should all mind our own fucking business. But like, there have been trained professionals who have evaluated her mental health at some point in time and decided like sis needs help. And I think we now see mental health differently as a society, and I think celebrities are treated better and they have access to more of their own narrative. So again, like maybe in 2021 it's different how we're viewing mental health with respect to how well you can take care of yourself and your estate. But at that point in time, and we always have to look at things through the lens of like when they happened, people, we just didn't view mental health concerns the same way.
And so to your point, let's see what Britney wants now, right? Because now there's new filings that are coming out, and it's looking like finally she is asking for some things, right? You see it with her asking for Jody Montgomery to be the new conservator over her person instead of her dad, asking for Bessemer Trust to be conservator over her finances. So now let's look and see what the courts do with that. And hopefully, and I actually even saw that in one of the latest filings, her attorney requested on her behalf that some of these documents be public, that they're not sealed. And so there's speculation, of course, because people are going to speculate about what that means, but maybe she does want more transparency in all this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a big part of that is because she, it seems, now sees that there is this group of people who really care and who are more than just fans. And so, like, I think the Free Britney movement, that kind of started in 2009. My understanding is in response to this conservatorship, and they've gained a ton of steam in the past year or two. And I think a big part of that was that she was treated terribly by the world and the media, and like we were thriving on watching it all happen. And so fans started to take notice of this, and they were like, this is kind of bullshit. It's not fair. There's a double standard. On top of the fact that, like, what happened to Britney? Why is she not performing anymore when she was the one who, she was always out, and she wasn't even seen out of the house anymore. And so they start this Free Britney campaign.
Yeah. And it really takes off, too, with this documentary, Framing Britney Spears.
Such a good one.
It is really good. Highly recommend.
I loved it.
It's out on FX and Hulu. And in it, you just find out a lot. And I recommend it. And there's even a podcast, too, that's dedicated to the Free Britney movement. And hashtags are trending. Celebrities are coming out. I feel like you should talk about Justin's apology.
Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the We Are Sorry Britney hashtag. Oh, yeah. I feel like I owe her an apology because I was joking about pre or post Buzz Cut Britney, and then I did all this research and I was like, damn.
I actually thought about that when prepping for this episode.
Definitely going to hell for that one. We'll hashtag you can throw me a We Are Sorry Britney. But I think the person who owes an even bigger apology than I do is Justin fucking Timberlake.
Get it, girl.
The complete trash and scumbag of this entire, most of the story, let's say that.
You upset? I can't tell.
I'm really upset. Let me tell you why. I had an issue with the way that he treated her. Obviously, we saw this with the course of the documentary. You know, we knew that things were happening and that he wasn't, like, maybe the best guy. You add in a little dose of Janet Jackson and the fact that he revealed this lady's breast on TV and, like, completely threw her out to the wolves and didn't do anything to help her. So I'm like, you're a scumbag. You do not treat people well, especially women, but you get away with fucking crimes all the time. I mean, I think he does.
I love that. No, you're right. It's just not fair.
So who cares? I hate Justin. That's all that matters. He issued some BS apology via Instagram. That was 3 slides. I read it all. I don't forgive you, and Brittany doesn't either. But we're going to move on now.
All right. You feel better?
I do. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Bye, Justin.
Hashtag bye, Justin. Start that trending. Okay, so where are we right now? Joni Montgomery is still temporarily in charge of Britney's person until September 2021. And then this month, actually, the judge, like we said, agreed to equal partnership between Bessemer Trust and Jamie over Britney's finances. So this is really signaling some questions about Jamie and maybe his involvement going forward. So we'll see, because Britney's still trying to get him cut out as of now.
It definitely kind of makes it seem like they don't believe in the way that he's managing the money, because as a reminder, he was previously the only person doing the finances. So for them to split it.
That, and I think respecting her opinion now that she's giving one too. I mean, we don't know. Maybe she has expressed something else, but because, again, the documents are sealed, it's sounding like she's actually feeling more empowered too to say, hey, no more. And it might be a result of things that have happened with her kids, right? That restraining order. Who knows? I mean,
which is fair. And she's maintained the entire time that she's afraid of him and that she's not going to perform if he's continued to keep really power over her personal or finance. But I think definitely the personal, she's like, he has got to go.
Yes. And a reminder that even as of the latest court documents that we know of, she still hasn't asked for the conservatorship to be terminated altogether. She just wants him out. So could be speculation, but maybe she still feels like there's a need for it. Maybe she'll ease back into things slowly, maybe starting with getting rid of the conservatorship over her person. Who knows?
I mean, listen, she had a massive estate. She was a huge superstar. Like, I imagine that's a lot to manage, just generally kind of managing the affairs of concerts and residencies and tours and shows and all of that, and then you add in the finances that come with all of that. Like, that's I would say, in fairness, I would be like, is somebody gonna do this for me?
Right.
I can barely manage my own affairs right now, and I'm not making millions.
Right. That's why also when people were like, we haven't seen her, I'm like, maybe she's just tired.
Maybe she's tired of y'all.
Maybe she's so tired of what you guys have done to her too. Everyone's like, oh, we want more Britney. I'm like, but do we deserve her? Right. I mean, let her take a break.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds, I know the next hearings are scheduled for March and April, and like you said, there's going to be a decision in September of 2021, so it sounds like we'll definitely see if the judge is swayed by A, what she's saying in these petitions, and also B, like, the media behind it all. There's all these people who are outside the court every day, like, now fighting for her and, wanting more for her. So I'm definitely curious to see, like, what the court is ultimately going to decide.
Including the flip side of it, the Free Britney movement. Like, let's make sure that Britney is ready for this
Right,
too, right?
right.
So what did we talk about? We talked about Britney Spears, the wonderful pop star that she is, the way that the media and different people in the media and fellow celebs like Justin Timberlake, he who should not be named, have unfairly treated her, and the pressures that she's gone through that led up to her being put into this conservatorship, the status of that conservatorship, and we'll see what it looks like go forward. So, Nicole, what's our moral of the story here? Give us some advice. What are we supposed to walk away with?
I would say if you're ever a conservator, don't be a scam artist.
Okay.
And I don't know for a fact that Jamie is a scam artist, but I'm just saying generally nobody should be a scam artist.
When you said that, I took it very generally. I was like, where's that coming from? I have no idea.
I have no evidence for anything I'm saying right now.
Yeah, it's so random.
What's your advice?
I would say, again, this is not about anybody in particular, but if you're going to be a mom or dad, be a good mom or dad.
Fair.
You? Anything else?
I would like to tell all of the paparazzi in the world to back the fuck up and let people live their lives. It feels like we need to just keep it pushing, get out of people's faces with cameras.
Including ourselves with our little phone cameras, too. And my last piece of advice is going to be, don't believe everything you hear except when we tell you something.
Because we're obviously the guardians of truth.
Yes, believe everything we tell you.
Come back for every single episode.
Speaking of that, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Legally Judgy. We hope you enjoyed listening to us talk as much as we love the sound of our own voices.
If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Also, feel free to connect with us on our socials at Legally Judgy. Until next time, #FreeBritney.
#BooJustin.